My crazy ex wanted to claim my phone, so I left her a sizable bill. So, back 14-ish years ago, I had a somewhat brief relationship with this crazy devil's gross lover. Why, you ask? Story time! I had recently come out of a 2.5-year relationship with a teenage girlfriend. We grew apart, she moved back to her mom's, and I stayed in my apartment. Met this one on a dating site. She seemed exciting due to the devil's gross. I wanted to be adventurous, you know? She moved in with me really fast. Maybe 3 months in. Dumbest decision ever on my part. She was controlling, jealous, and generally a lazy girl. I tried breaking up with her numerous times, but she'd scream, cry, beg, and keep at it for hours until I just wanted her to shut the heck up and agreed to give her another chance. This was back when iPhone 4S had recently hit the market, and as one day we were at the mall, I had a look at said phone. Salesman gave me a good deal, so I decided to purchase my first smartphone. Unfortunately, I didn't have my ID with me, but she did, so she signed the papers for the service subscription and financing, although with my name, info, and payment details on it. When I finally did manage to kick her out, she had that spectacular idea to demand that I give her back her phone. She figured that since her name was on the papers, it was her phone. Guess again. I can prove every single payment ever made. You're not entitled to anything. But I played along, since it meant she would meet up with me and I could press on her all the stuff she stole from me when she moved out. We met at a busy intersection, cars, bicycles, pedestrians, all that. Turned out, she had brought along a couple of Sims to threaten me if it didn't go as she wanted it to. It ended up with them attacking me and me fighting them for a few minutes until a couple of numerous witnesses intervened and they ran off. Police came, I filed a report, but that's a different story arc. She would then still insist it was her phone and said that she would cancel the service subscription. Okay. Since I know that her signature means her responsibility, I went and racked up a sizable phone bill by buying in-game currency in World of Tanks that I played at the time, about $400 worth of currency. I wanted to keep going, but I didn't want to risk her being able to report me for fraud or theft or whatever. I cancelled the payment agreement from my account, and within a few weeks I got called up by a woman from the provider asking me to pay the bill. I'm terribly sorry, but you have the wrong person. It's not my name on the agreement, so legally it's not my responsibility. A few more weeks went by and this giga Chad called me up, again asking me about paying said phone bill. I gave Chad a brief explanation and I could straight hear him perk up at his desk before he simply stated, with what I am sure was a big poop-eating grin on his face. What you're saying is absolutely correct. I'll make sure we don't contact you anymore and we give her a call instead. It's clearly not your responsibility to pay for her subscription. I am terribly sorry for the inconvenience. The entitlement of some people. I never got back the stuff she stole from me, but at least I knew those $400 would be sent to collection and would likely sit for years and years and grow exponentially. I was just happy I was rid of her, and a couple of years later, I met my girlfriend of, so far, 11 years. Well, the story is good, but World of Tanks? Wow, I really forgot it existed. Is it still a thing now? Guys, we got to 246 subscribers! What a beautiful number! I would be so incredibly happy if we could get to 250 subscribers soon, because it is 250,000! Sounds great, right? So please subscribe, you will make my day, and come back tomorrow. I cannot leave, none of us can leave. Well, when I was in high school, I wasn't very popular, nor did I have a lot of friends. I was picked on and mistreated quite a bit, especially by the people in my grade and classes. I was chubbier back then, and the students in my class had given me the esteemed and clever nickname of Fat Butt. And that's what they called me throughout high school. It sucked. but I never let it get to me. The last time I saw most of them was in the government-required provincial exam, where we were all gathered together in the auditorium to do one final test. This was taken very seriously. Once the test started, we couldn't talk, get up, or look around, all under supervision of our 3 principals. It was just after the test started when I felt it. This grumbling, gargling thing was rapidly traveling through my innards, and I knew this was going to be bad. I raised my hand, a principal came by, and I asked to go to the washroom. Before I could even finish, he stopped me and said, "You should have gone before the exam. No one is allowed to leave. You'll have to hold it." This was not something that could be contained, and I doubt it was even from this world. It was coming, and it would not be ignored. I discreetly looked around at my classmates who had tortured me for years and knew what had to be done. I leaned forward, lifted my butt off the chair, and unleashed the biggest loaded fart of my life. Its burst call encompassed the entirety of the auditorium and was immediately met with laughter and jeers from my classmates. The principal sprang into action, attempting to get the situation under control, telling everyone to quiet down and gagged back to their tests. And then the smell hit. This had the pungent aroma of 7-day-old Texas roadkill left in the sun and marinated in a finely aged cream, garnished with straight sewage. Everyone started coughing, hacking, making disgusted sounds, and trying to get up. I fondly remember one person saying, "My eyes!" Again, the principals told everyone they couldn't leave. "This is a provincial exam. Sit down and finish the test." I was crying with silent laughter, while the principals were desperately opening doors and windows, but it did not help. We sat in that foul funk for 15 minutes before it returned to whatever world it crawled out of. I moved and never saw them again, but I will always remember the principals gagging while trying to waft the fumes out with an open-close motion with the doors. First of all, amazing story. The only thing I felt bad about, but just for a second, are those poor principals. But on the other hand, I'm sure they were just teachers who witnessed the mistreatment of OP happening for years and done nothing. So screw them. And second, OP is very brave to have courage to let rip one that felt like that and not given a crap if you really poop your pants. The ski club. At high school reunion last month, we talked about events while we were there. I knew some of the details of this back then, but here's the story of petty revenge. We had a large population of students with Polish names. At the end of the school year, a proposal was submitted to create a Polish-American club, similar to the Spanish and French clubs already established. As with the Spanish and French clubs, the purpose of the club was to learn more about Polish history and culture. The proposal included an advisor who had a Polish surname. It was turned down by the principal after being approved by the other club advisors because we do not teach Polish here. So the same students submitted a proposal for a ski club, with a very brief description of the purpose being to learn more about the ski culture, with the final culminating event being a ski trip. The new advisor was a female teacher whose maiden name ended in ski. Her married name, as she was known in the school, was Smith. It was approved by the club advisors, who had no clue about the actual purpose of the club, and rubber-stamped by the principal. Just as a note, because I don't think that it is obvious for people who are not aware, but typical Polish surname always ends in S-K-I letter combination. For example, Powolocki, Wisniewski. So the same students submitted a proposal for a ski club. In the fall, the club started up. Weekly meetings were held that focused on Polish history and culture. A few non-Polish students came to the first meeting, but once they found out it had nothing to do with skiing down a mountain, they didn't come back. Membership started out with about 10 students, but by the end of the fall semester had grown to about 20. They went on the field trip, called it a ski trip, to a Polish restaurant about 45 minutes away. The permission form had to be approved by the principal, And typical for him, he simply signed it without reading it, probably assuming it was to go skiing. Toward the end of the spring semester, another field trip to the same restaurant was planned. Also, by this time, the ski club was the largest club in terms of membership, with around 40 members. The advisor notified the principal about the field trip, as she had done in the fall, but this time he actually read the field trip permission form. Realizing that it was actually the Polish American Club with a clever name, he denied permission and immediately ordered the club disbanded. In that state, schools received state aid money for every day of the school was open, unless attendance dipped below a certain threshold. In that case, there was no state aid money for the school that day. The petty revenge time. The entire club and many other students held their own version of the senior skip day. They called it ski skipping and spent the day at the park. A bunch of parents chaperoned. There was no state aid for the school that day. The students submitted notes excusing them from school from their parents over the next day or two, so there was no disciplinary action that could be taken. The advisor did not go, as she would have been in some serious trouble for that. Patsy only, as the principal only lost about 0.5% of the state aid for the year. But it was enough to make an impact on his budget. The next year, the Polish-American Club was proposed and approved. Someone in the comments last week asked me for a wholesome story. Well, I guess this one is for you. Annoying guy at work. One time, I was working on a construction site for a fancy hotel. The owner had a lot of money and was basically rebuilding this crumbling Victorian building from scratch. He was one of those old money types, silk suits and fancy, vaguely British accent and everything. Not a bad guy, but obviously living insulated in that rich person bubble a lot of people like that live in. Never had to worry about having money for groceries and rent, that whole kind of vibe. He'd come and inspect the site regularly and talk with the workers very casually and friendly, no pressure on us at all. Really a great guy to work for, except sometimes his son would make this visit instead. Guy was a grade A rich douchebag. Only job he's ever had was from his dad, and that basically involved coming to sites like ours and acting a big shot. He'd click his fingers at us and treat us like hired help, demanding we bring him coffee and stuff, and talking to us like we were his servants. He'd constantly make us do pointless status update meeting, purely to make himself feel more important. Meetings that wasted a lot of time. Now, after a few weeks of this, me and the guys came up with a plan for some petty revenge. Now, the hotel was almost finished and the plumbing completed for the first floor, so we had all the porta potties removed. Not really necessary when you got a brand new bathroom to use. Much nicer to that porta john. Now, this new bathroom was not located in an obvious spot within the complex of the hotel, so the son and his dad comes round again for a visit. The son, being a total douche as usual, demands another meeting. Before he does, I saw him looking around for the porta potties and obviously not finding them. I quickly usher him into our meeting cabin, ignoring that he was looking for a bathroom. We generously pour the boy an extra large coffee and begin an exhaustive summary of our progress. Well, after half an hour, he's obviously squirming, but I make sure to keep going in more detail about the project. He asks where the bathroom is, and I say we're waiting new porta potties to be delivered. The guys find it hilarious and are sure to drag the meeting out as long as possible. Not one of them told him we actually had a bathroom. Well, no wonder, being such a douche, he was looking for a bathroom. Oh my god, I'm so sorry. I have just cringed at myself, but I really have to let it out of me, if you know what I mean. Okay, let's move on to the next story until we are over-cringed. My cheating girlfriend's awkward date. This took place when I, 29 male, was 19 years old. I had just left Navy boot camp and entered A school. For some background on this story, and for those of you who aren't aware, boot camp teaches you to be a good sailor, while A school teaches you to do the specific job you'll be doing while in the Navy. I had been there for some time when I decided to go to a little movie theater on base and met a girl who I'll call Cheater. Cheater and I hit it off pretty well, and we started going out. Over a month into the relationship, we make plans to meet up the next day for lunch after the morning classes at one of the on-base restaurants. I make it into the eatery and find Cheater already there, eating with another man. To paint a picture, they weren't just eating, but leaning very close to one another, holding hands. It turns out that not only did she forget our plans, but she also made the same plans with an entirely different guy. Seeing this, I decided to get my food, walk up all sweetly to them, and join them for lunch. The look on Cheater's face when she saw me was one of mortification. I introduced myself as a good friend of Cheater and made small talk, asked questions about the two of them, and anything else that made Cheater as uncomfortable as possible before politely excusing myself so I could head to my afternoon classes. Although I didn't outright rat her out, I made sure to lay it on thick and watched her squirm as her other boyfriend began to piece it all together over the course of our meal. It's sufficient to say things didn't last between me and Cheater. Excuse me, but what part was the revenge part? Maybe OP also paid for their lunch? What was the revenge part? Am I the butthole because my boyfriend did not see me? Yesterday, we went to go to see a movie. I had forgotten my phone and communicated that to my boyfriend on the drive there. He asked me if I would be okay without it, and I said yes. After the movie, I told him I had to use the restroom. When I got out, I walked outside. He usually waits out by the entrance, but he wasn't there. I waited a few minutes, but I couldn't call him, and he had the car key. I tried walking to the car, but he wasn't there. I went back in and checked near the men's restroom, but nothing. After about 10 minutes, I got really upset. I tried to keep myself in view of the theater while I walked around it, but he wasn't anywhere. Some strangers even offered to get me an Uber. Finally, I went in and checked one more time, and he was sitting on a couch looking at his phone. I told him I'd been looking for him, but I wasn't blaming about it, but he got super defensive and told me it was my fault for not seeing him and I had no reason to be upset. He kept saying, "I don't understand why you're so upset," on the car ride back. When I tried to tell him that I wanted us to be more in sync with each other, especially since we are going on a trip out of the country soon, he scoffed and said, "Do I need to tell you where I'm going to be whenever we are separate?" Which felt unfair. I didn't have my phone. Plus, what if something happens to me? How long would it take for him to notice? Am I overreacting? I feel kind of angry now and still hurt. Well, I guess when OP said, "I want to be more in sync with you," but meant, "Well, I really want you to read my thoughts and report to me your geoposition every second of the day." I'm sure that the boyfriend was just sitting there, minding his own business, and maybe thinking that, oh well, it's taking her some time. Maybe she's pooping. I don't understand what OP wanted boyfriend to do. Was he supposed to run into the bathroom screaming, "OP, OP, where are you? Are you doing number 1 or number 2? Is everything going as planned? I am here for you. I really want to be in sync." Guys, we got to 246 subscribers. What a beautiful number. I would be so incredibly happy if we could get to 250 subscribers soon, because it is 250,000. Sounds great, right? So please subscribe, you will make my day, and come back tomorrow. Am I the butthole for telling my mom to shut up and accept that my wife and I aren't naming our kids the way she and dad named me and my siblings? My wife and I, both late 20s, had our first child together in June. Before he was born, there was a lot of talk about names from different family members on both sides. But the pressure to tell was on my side specifically. We didn't tell a soul what the name would be until our son was born, and we had left the hospital. My parents were disappointed when we announced our son's name. My family are very traditional in how they named us. We were each named after grandparents, and that's how they feel everyone should name their kids. My wife's family do not have a tradition when it comes to naming babies. They just name them and go. No fuss or insisting on certain names, but my wife's side tends to favor more uncommon and unusual names. My wife's and my taste tends to lean a lot more to her side than to mine, which is how we ended up choosing the name Hollis for our son. This was not something my parents liked because they expected our son to be either Jack, my dad, or Parker, my father-in-law. But I know they were expecting a little Jack to be born. So that added to their reaction. But they quizzed us on our choice to break tradition, and I told them it wasn't a tradition my wife's family used. And we decided we weren't going to have one either. Over the last couple of months, both parents have questioned why, have wanted to discuss other names for future babies. My mom has been the worst by far. She asked why we went with something so unlike the names we have in our family. I told her our family wasn't the only family involved, but that we also did not take the family taste into account. We went with what we liked. She pointed out our tastes were a lot like my in-laws, and I said yes, but that it wasn't about my in-laws and their taste, it was about my wife's and my taste. I told her I was done discussing it, and since that point, I now change the topic or end the conversation when she brings it up or refuses to let it go. We had a little naming ceremony on Saturday, and my mom decided she was going to dig in her heels about the name, and she told me we'd picked a stupid name and she hated it. She wanted us to change it and name him Jack or Parker. She told me we had no business breaking a long-held tradition in our family, and there is a reason those traditions are there, so foolish people cannot name their babies the worst names imaginable. She also said my in-laws must be so smug, thinking they'll have at least 2 stupidly named grandkids, like they had all stupidly named kids. I lost my temper. I told her to shut up and accept that we're not naming our kids like she and dad named me and my siblings, and I told her she would need to leave and learn to be more respectful, because I would not take those insults against my wife or her family lying down. My mom hated being told to shut up, and she said I had no excuse for rudeness to her face. I thought she was crazy when she was rude. Am I the butthole though? No, of course not. You can name your baby whatever you want to. And if your mom wants to name a baby Jack or Parker, well, she can talk to your dad and they can have another baby. Am I the butthole for reminding my ex I am only responsible for our children and not all of his kids? My ex-husband, 40 male, and I, 35 female, have 2 children together, 12 and 11 male. We divorced about 10 years ago now because I feel like he regressed as a husband and a father during my second pregnancy, and he was even worse when our younger son was born. He was acting like a high school or college kid or a single 20-something with no kids. He spent more time with friends than with us. His friends were also treating me more like his mom and expecting me to pick him up from their houses when they needed to get on with stuff. He fought for 50% custody of our kids, which he wasn't given, and for the first 2 or 3 years, he had every other weekend and a 2-week period during the summer with them as well, as alternating holidays. He started being more involved and eventually he did get 50% custody. It was at that time I found out he got some woman pregnant, and he realized that with 3 kids he needed to get his act together. He ended up with the full custody of his 3rd kid. Then he met his wife. They have 2 more children together now. There are 2 kids in her life, but I don't believe they're her biological children anyway, who she's also partially supporting. Those 2 kids don't live with them, but apparently she or them pay for stuff for those children. My ex and I started getting along better, but then his marriage was rocky. As his marriage worsened, he started treating me like a co-parent to all his kids. He He'd bring his other children to custody exchanges and expected interaction between me and his other children. Then it was requests to babysit for him and his wife, which I never did. Then it was comments about our boys' old clothes at my house being sent to his house by his other kids and how we needed to make sure they had adequate clothing. I told him there was no we in that. And he said, of course there is, we're co-parents. I said, of our two? Sure, but not his other kids. It was requests for me to have his children in my home or to take them out to eat with me and our kids. And finally, it has turned into back-to-school craziness. I bought supplies for the boys and he told me I hadn't bought nearly enough for everyone. I was like, hold up, what's that supposed to mean? And he pointed out that what I bought wouldn't be possible to share evenly between all 5 children. I told him we don't have 5 children, we have 2. The 2 I bought those for. I told him I am responsible for our children, not his 3 others. I told him he has a wife, they share 2 of those children. The other is in their home, so it's up to them. He told me that I know they don't have a lot of money, and I cut him off and told him that still it didn't make his children my problem. He said I cannot possibly take care of just 2 of them, not when we are co-parenting and all 5 kids live together 50% of the time. He said I should be a part of the community to help raise those kids, and keeping my distance like I do is so dang cold. Am I the butthole? Opie's ex-husband behaves like a kid who really wanted a puppy, but then he got fed up with the puppy and he was like, well, mommy, now you take care of the puppy. Am I the butthole for making my renter's kid feel bad about food? I, 35 female, am a mom of a 7-year-old. It's been just the 2 of us in a house with too many bedrooms for a while, so when a friend of a friend was looking for a room to rent, I agreed. Harold, 42 male, now leases a 2nd floor room. I knew Harold had a son the same age as my daughter, and I knew that Harold Jr. would occasionally be staying over. Over the past 6 or 7 months, occasionally staying over was turned into Harold having his son here more than half the time. No immediate worries there. But the kids sharing food and snacks has turned into me buying all the food and snacks. When they come in after school, etc., I do not like to tell one kid they cannot have what the other is eating, so I am fine sharing groceries like that. But over the past few months of school and summer camp and varying schedules, I keep going into the pantry to pack up my daughter's lunch or grab a snack, and groceries that used to last a month are gone in less than a week. I wouldn't mind if they were getting replaced, but I've made a couple of, hey, it looks like we are running low on insert snack or lunch item here comments to no avail, and have also asked directly by saying, can you pick up whatever food item on the next trip out? Looks like the kids burned through it. But the furthest I've gotten is Harold picking up some snacks and food that only he would eat and the kids would never touch, and saying, hey, I get something like kimchi. Grab some if you want. I finally put the non-perishable snacks and food to my daughter's lunch on her school supply shelf in her closet. And when we pack her lunch in the morning, she chooses what items she wants. Harold Jr. has made several comments about not having his favorite things for his lunches or snacks, but I've left that to his dad. Harold has said nothing to me. Harold Jr.'s mom was dropping him off the other day, and we were talking in the driveway for a bit, and she said that it really hurt Junior's feelings that I was hiding food from him. I told her that was a conversation she should have with his dad. But she was pretty cold afterward, and now Harold is a bit frosty too. I am sure she said something to him. So, am I the butthole for solving the grocery issue the way I did? The kid is not OP's responsibility. If I were OP, I would give Harold the notice and kick him out. And to be honest, I think that Harold himself was also eating the snacks, because 2 kids cannot possibly eat a month's worth of food in less than a week. But if you add an adult man into the equation, anything is possible. You sure you want your money? fine, you're gonna get every penny. This isn't my story, it was a close friend of a friend. I am not sure how I never thought about sharing it, as it is one of the best malicious compliance stories I have ever heard. There is also quite a bit of background here, mostly to explain old tech. This guy, we'll call him G, was pretty wealthy. Dude had a nepo job where he worked in a factory fixing the machinery, which almost literally never broke. Someone always had to be on duty to be ready for repairs, so he got all kinds of overtime and was being paid almost $75 per hour in the early 2000s. To give you an idea of the kind of money he was making and how he didn't care, he spent around most whole days sitting around watching movies on a personal laptop that he had spent over $2,000 on and just left it at his desk. If he had a call to the floor, it wouldn't take him more than an hour, and that would happen maybe 3 times in a week. Holidays were 2.5 times pay, and he worked every one of them. This guy was a bit of a tech nerd, and he got an ISDN account as soon as it came out. For you younglings, or folks who weren't savvy at the time, ISDN was basically 2 56.6 kbps modems smooshed together. This was back when 56.6K was as good as it got for residential, and you could still pay for slower. So fast AF for its day. Back in the days of dial-up, the dark ages, some services would be paid by the minute of usage in addition to your monthly bill, and that's how this worked. Also, because dial-up was literal and using existing infrastructure, you could take your modem with you and use it somewhere else by logging into your account from a new location and dialing the closest number to you. This was also back in the day of long-distance chargers. Now for the actual story. G just got his ISDN modem and after a day or so took it to his brother's house, one town over, to show him how fast it was. And after they played around on the internet for a bit, G had to go to work and he would be doing some long shifts for the next couple of days. So his brother asked to borrow his modem, which G said was fine. I don't understand exactly how it happened, but his brother had signed into a long-distance number and then forgot to shut the connection down. And then G got his first month's bill. It was over $14,000! He immediately called the service provider and explained the situation, and they basically told him, "You signed a contract. Sucks to suck, we want our money." He relented and set up a payment plan. He would also be required to keep the contract going until the bill was fully paid. Now, if you've never even heard of ISDN, even if you're older than 30, I don't blame you. This was a very short-lived technology and was replaced by DSL just a couple years later, but unlike ISDN, DSL required new infrastructure, and for some reason I do not fully understand, but I have guessed it's probably the way some important switch on the service provider's network was set up. The two services could not coexist in the same small region. Regions the size of a neighborhood. And G lived in a pretty nice neighborhood, not mansions, but upper middle class. The best neighborhood our small town had to offer, in fact. And people just wanted DSL. It was the first time the internet was getting close to recognizable as it is today, because it was so much faster than what was previously available. The folks in this neighborhood wanted those speeds and did not like being told that they couldn't have it. So, service provider calls up G and explained the situation and offered to waive the remaining amount of the bill. G told them the whole bill was bullcrap and asked if they would refund what he had already paid, but they just told him to go F himself. Cue malicious compliance. G tells them he has a contract and points out that they are obligated to fulfill their end of the contract and he will be paying his bill in full, and hung up. He keeps paying. Service provider keeps getting calls from more customers wanting DSL and folks who had previously called calling back more and more irate. G gets another call, then another, until service provider decides to just tell people exactly who is responsible for their neighborhood's lack of DSL service. His neighbors get loose on him. But does G care? Not at all. just keeps paying his bill. This went on for more than a year. Eventually, service provider just decided to get rid of ISDN completely, as it was a legitimately outdated technology, and did forgive the remainder of G's bill since they weren't fulfilling their end of the contract. But the whole thing was just wonderful. I don't like this story. It was not very neighborly of G to act like that. He was offered to resolve the situation, but no. He had to be a bot and made his whole neighborhood suffer. I don't like it. Guys, we got to 246 subscribers! What a beautiful number! I would be so incredibly happy if we could get to 250 subscribers soon, because it is 250,000. Sounds great, right? So please subscribe, you will make my day, and come back tomorrow. I thought I mastered malicious compliance, then my wife showed me how it's really done. For this story, you need to know that I am the kind of person who will go a great distance for a good laugh, as you will see below. I love this story and will tell it every once in a while, even though it has been more than 20 years. I live in the US and I own an IT support company. Many years ago, I used a cell phone company named Nextel. They had this great push-to-talk feature that turned your phone into a walkie-talkie, which was perfect for communicating with coworkers in my IT work. However, their customer service was a nightmare. Anytime I needed to contact them, it would take at least 30-40 minutes on hold. Eventually, I had to switch to a cheaper service, which meant getting a new number. Now you can port your number to a new carrier, but back then you had to change numbers if you switched carriers. I cancelled all the phones on our plan except for mine, which I downgraded to an emergency plan costing about $10 a month. I left the old phone plugged in at my office and set my voicemail message to instruct callers of my new number. The phone just sat next to my desk on a shelf, plugged into a charger so that I could see if anyone called. I could also hear the phone make a sound when it disconnected from the cellular network, and then a different sound when it connected to the cellular network. It connected and disconnected constantly there in my office. I would estimate that it only stayed connected to the network about 50% of the time. After 6 months, I decided to cancel it. I had to wait on hold for the customary 30 to 40 minutes just to cancel my service. After telling the service rep that I was always dropping off the network and that I had already switched services, they verified the service problems on my account and cancelled my entire plan. I wasn't under any contract at the time, so there was no problem cancelling my service with Nextel. As expected, I got my final bill. It was somewhere around $10 since it was my monthly plan, just the emergency plan, and I didn't make any phone calls. I paid the bill and was happy to be done with that carrier. Then, the next month, I got a bill for 4 cents. Yes, just 4 cents! I figured it was a clerical error and ignored it, expecting them to write it off. But no, each month another bill for 4 cents arrived. It was incredulous. I checked the postmark and saw that the postage to send me the bill was costing them 10 times more than the bill itself. And they kept sending the bill every month. I could have paid the bill, but it seemed ridiculous to write a check for 4 cents and spend more on a stamp. After 6 months, I finally had enough and decided on some very petty malicious compliance. I decided to invest the 40 minutes on hold to call Nextel to work this out. By golly, if they wanted my 4 cents, I would give them my 4 cents. I planned to wait on hold for 40 minutes and pay the 4 cents with a credit card, knowing it would cost them more in fees. I told my wife about my plan, thinking it was the perfect malicious compliance story, but my wife, the true master of malicious compliance, suggested even better idea. Call and ask if I could make payments on the 4 cents, splitting it into 2 payments on my credit card. OMG! I was in the presence of malicious royalty. I called, waited on hold for 40-45 minutes, and finally got through to a representative. The representative sounded like one of those airport terminal attendants who act like they are checking your reservations, but instead they are writing a Stephen King-length novel. I could hear the clickety-clackety sound of the keyboard. The female representative was constantly typing as I explained that I had cancelled my service, but kept getting the final bill and proposed making payments. The representative, typing away, said she'd look up my account. As she typed away at her keyboard, I explained that I had gotten the final bill and that I would like to set up a payment plan to take care of the outstanding balance. I told her that I would like to pay half on my credit card today and pay the remaining half the following month. She was agreeing with me and typing away when suddenly she stopped typing and went quiet. "Sir," she said. "Yes," I replied. "Are you aware of the balance amount?" "Yes," I said. "4 cents?" she said. "Yes," I said. "I figured you really wanted those 4 cents because you keep spending all this postage to send me bills each month, so I am just calling you to take care of it." After a brief silence, I heard the clickety-clack of the keyboard again, and she said that I would not have to worry about the balance because she was writing it off. I insisted on giving my credit card for the first half of the payment, but she firmly dismissed it and assured me that I wouldn't get any more bills. My wife's suggestion turned a simple prank into a masterpiece of malicious compliance. I may be good at it, but my wife is on another level. And you really have to want to do malicious compliance to wait on hold for 40 minutes. True, if I were OP, this story would never happen. Because gee, just the thought of waiting 45 minutes on hold really turns me down. Hello everyone, welcome back to Red Doe Reads. Today we have r/Am I the Butthole? If you want me to cover some specific subreddit in the next video, leave it in the comments. Am I the butthole for punishing my foster daughter for telling the authorities my 12-year-old daughter was taking substances? I, 34 female, have been looking after my foster daughter Mary, 13 female, for over a year, ever since her parents passed away because of doing too much substances all at once. I also have a biological daughter, Lila, 12 female. Mary and Lila mostly get along, although there have been some minor arguments. A few weeks ago, the police came to Lila's school. Someone had sent an anonymous message to the school saying that Lila was in possession of substances. After searching through her phone, locker, and bags, they realized that the substances in question were Skittles that Lila had lying around in her bag, accidentally ripping open the packaging. Lila was terrified of the police and was traumatized by the incident. She's a very shy, quiet girl who had a panic attack at the thought of being sent to prison. While they wouldn't reveal who told on her, Lila suspected that it was Mary, since she was the only one who could have seen the Skittles in her bag. Mary denied this at first, but eventually she snapped under pressure and admitted it. She said she made a mistake, but was scared that Lila would pass away just like her parents. I know that Mary has trauma related to substances, but that's not an excuse. I've made it very clear that she can come talk to me about anything, even if it involves Lila. And yet she went to the school instead of telling me first. Mary said that she only went to the school in case I was biased towards Lila. She knew full well the legal ramifications of her actions. Both of them could have potentially been removed from my care. I cannot help but think her intentions are malicious. Skittles look absolutely nothing like substances. She didn't even talk to me or Lila about it. She just went straight to the authorities. So I decided to ground her, stop her allowance, increase her chores, and take away her electronics for the entire summer. She is still upset with me for this, saying I went too far and I was punishing her for having trauma and trying to do the right thing. But I feel like I have a duty to teach her that it's not okay to potentially get our entire family into legal trouble over a misunderstanding. Am I the butthole? And there is an edit that the reason I thought she had malicious intentions was because the week before, Mary coincidentally started a large argument with Lila for hanging out with Mary's crush. Lila eats candies all the time, especially Skittles, and Mary knows that Skittles are her favorite. Ooh, this one is a doozy. So basically, OP is mad at her foster child because her biological child got scared. The fact that her foster child obviously acted out of care, love, and trauma, obviously, did not really matter to OP. So Mary was right about OP being biased towards her biological child. And I do not understand the fuss and the punishment that OP inflicted on Mary seems too harsh. Nothing would happen if police came, checked, and found nothing. So it only seems to me that OP is afraid that police could find something in her home or in Lila's bag. Because why be scared of authorities that much if you have zero things to hide? But maybe I am biased, and I apologize for that. Guys, we got to 246 subscribers! What a beautiful number! I would be so incredibly happy if we could get to 250 subscribers soon, because it is 250,000! Sounds great, right? So please subscribe, you will make my day, and come back tomorrow. Am I the butthole for not apologizing to my friend after she screamed at me and my kid at her wedding? 2 weeks ago, I, 29 female, my husband, 31 male, and son, 4 male, attended my BFF's 28 female wedding. It was a beautiful ceremony and everything was going great until BFF and her husband cut the cake. Important context, BFF did speak to me during her wedding planning about being unsure on whether or not to allow kids at her wedding. Her 2 sisters both have kids around my son's age, and she sees him as her nephew too. But she wanted to be able to let loose and enjoy her wedding without worrying about any kids messing things up. I gave her my opinion, saying that me and my hubby allowed kids at our wedding and we wouldn't have it any other way. The kids were still family and deserved to be included. After that, and speaking with her sisters, she and her husband okayed kids for the wedding. Now the ceremony went swimmingly. BFF's nieces sat with me, hubby, and my son, as her sisters were in the bridal party. I brought quiet activities to keep them entertained and everybody behaved. I even cried from how lovely it was. When we got to the reception, nieces were returned to their parents, so it was now just me, my hubby, and son. Dinner went fine, and then the couple took to the dance floor for the first dance. Afterwards, everybody was welcome to the floor to dance for a bit before cake cutting. At this point, the kids were running around and playing with each other, and it was a fairly secure space, and I knew almost everybody there, so I felt comfortable with my son playing with the other kids while hubby and I had fun dancing. Important to mention, hubby offered to drive so I could enjoy myself, so I have had a couple glasses of wine at that point. BFF had also been drinking and celebrating. BFF and her husband go to do cake cutting, and hubby and I are a little slow getting there, so there was a crowd blocking our view. Suddenly, I hear BFF scream my son's name. Hubby and I push forward to see what's wrong. I see my son with frosting around his mouth and on his fingers. The cake had a small chunk taken out of it. I try to apologize, but BFF turns around and yells, "This is your fault! Your son ruined my cake! He's only here because you told me it would be worse to include the kids!" I yelled back, telling her that it was just an accident, and the rest of the cake was still edible. That this was her nephew she was screaming about. She told me I was no friend of hers and he was not her nephew. In front of everyone, she told me to leave or she would call security. Son and I were crying, and then 3 of us left. One of the bride's sisters reached out to me after and apologized for her sister's reaction, but said I needed to apologize. I think sorries are out of the window now after her outburst. I told her sister so and said I expect an apology first before I would say anything to her. Not only did she blow up at me in front of everyone, but at my son. I'm humiliated, but even more angry on his behalf. So, am I the butthole if I refuse to apologize first? No, no, and no! First question I have, if OP is truly wife's BFF, why OP was not in bridal party? Second question, getting all worked up on a 4-year-old? Karen, really? I think OP should end the friendship and move on with her life for good. Am I the butthole for moving out alone and not with my stepsister and lying about where I'm going to college? My dad and stepmom were both widowed when me and my stepsister, we're both 18 female, were 5. They met a year later and became widow-parent friends, which I always believe they started dating like a year after my mom and stepsister's dad passed away, but they don't want to be honest and say they moved on so fast, especially when they had kids. So we'd all hang out together during the day and we'd have late nights at each other's houses for a couple of years. Even back then, I struggled to get along with my stepsister. She was always a sensitive kid. She was shy, quiet, very delicate to any kind of negativity or being corrected. I am quiet and introverted, so similar. But I was supposed to be her best friend, said my dad, and to be gentle with her, be there for her, help her with stuff, make her laugh. It was annoying back then. And when my dad and stepmom admitted they were dating, I really hated that I was now stuck with her. She stuck to me in school and would track me down and follow me around. My dad told me I should love having a sister my age. I told him I did not. He told me to think about how great it could be. I told him I wanted to spend time with my friends without her. He said she was my best friend. She never could make her own friends. She's very hard to get close to. She hardly talks. She'll talk if it's just us, but it's so painful. She never wants to do anything and just follows me around. There were times I would leave and go spend time with friends and she'd cry. And I would get into trouble for leaving her. Then our half-siblings were born, and it was a crap show. I love my half-siblings. It was clear I loved them, but not my stepsister. My stepmom made that a very big deal and told me I shouldn't love some siblings more than others. I should love everyone. She also accused me of turning my half-siblings against my stepsister, but she never wanted to play with them or speak to them. Yet she would get upset when they favored me too. But mostly, she hated that I favored them to her. I never wanted to spend time with her. I always had to be forced to. It showed. That didn't help. Family therapy was quit after 4 months because my dad and stepmom did not like that so much focus was put on helping my stepsister branch out instead of helping us come together as sisters. For 2 years, my dad and stepmom and stepsister were planning for me and her to go to college together, to move out together so we could travel at the same time and settle in together. I made plans behind their back with my grandpa. And against their wishes, I moved out in June and moved in with my grandpa for the summer. And I'll be starting community college in this town when school starts back up. My dad finally found out. He and my stepmom were already annoyed I moved out without my sister, and now they're annoyed we won't be in the same school. My dad was annoyed I lied to him for 2 years. I told him he left me with no choice. Am I the butthole? Of course not. OP is not her sister's mom. She's her sister's, sister, as it says in the name. And since now OP is an adult who can take their own decisions, that's what she did. If one kid is more socially capable than the other, it does not mean that they have to be an emotional support to the other child. Am I a bad parent for not wanting to co-sleep with my child? My daughter and I have been co-sleeping since she was born. I'm a single mom and my daughter was 10 years old when I got married. Few months after the wedding, it was planned that me and my husband will be relocating at his place under the pretext of me taking a master's degree at a different city, and I will be back after a year. In the setup, I was hoping that my child will have the ample time to be comfortable sleeping without me. We made sure that everything was well taken care of for my daughter before we departed. Those 12 months of being away, my daughter and I would be on FaceTime every night in order for her to sleep. I also visited home every 2 months and even took my daughter on a vacation at our place for a month. During the vacation, we would still co-sleep and my husband stay on another room. Now that we were back at my hometown, I decided to co-sleep with my daughter again due to mom guilt. And after 5 months, I find myself frustrated and always agitated for not being able to sleep with my husband at night. I don't want to co-sleep with my daughter, who is 12 now, anymore, and I prefer to sleep with my husband. I explained it to her, and she responded by having a meltdown. Other things I noticed is that she doesn't like the idea of having a sibling. My husband is very understanding in this matter, and I have never heard him complain whenever I choose to co-sleep with my child instead of being with him at night. What can I do to fix this dilemma? Well, technically, this post is not Am I the Butthole? It is from Parenting subreddit, but I think this mother is a butthole of the day. What kind of mother is she? First of all, she lied to her kid. Second, she abandoned her kid. Then, after a year of her daughter sleeping alone and I guess settling with the idea, she comes back into her life and then again co-sleeps with her. Why? Because I don't buy that mom guilt bullcrap. OP should really get help from a child psychologist and be so remorseful about what she has done. Am I the butthole for refusing to let my daughter try and pursue swimming as a professional career by saying it's too late? I, 45 female, have 2 kids, Lara, 16 female, and Kian, 14 male. Both my kids take competitive swimming as a hobby. However, Lara is more athletically inclined than Kian and takes swimming more seriously than he does. She has been to regional and state championships a few times since elementary school and has even gotten close to qualifying for nationals a year ago. Recently, Lara came up to me and told me that she really looks up to athletes like Ian Thorpe, Emma McKeon, Michael Phelps, and other great swimming legends in Australia and across the globe. She's a huge Olympics fanatic like our family, so I wasn't surprised at first. However, when she told me that she wanted to pursue swimming professionally because, in her words, she's made a lot of progress and thinks it's possible for her to get an Olympic quota if she keeps training hard. She also told me she really wants to represent Australia at the Olympics in the future and cannot live without swimming. However, I shut her down really quickly after she said that. I told her that there is athletes younger than her already swimming at the Olympics in the preliminary stages and even at the finals. I reminded her that Michael Phelps was only 15 at his first Olympics and she didn't even qualify for nationals, before saying that it was a bit too late for her to try and pursue swimming professionally. I then reminded her how rigorous and strict the training regime was physically and mentally, how it was much more difficult than her swimming lessons. I also told her that she could put aside swimming until university and that education was much more effective than athleticism. My daughter looked sad and nodded before heading to her dad's room, and I heard her crying in his room. After half an hour had passed, my husband came downstairs and confronted me by saying that what I had told my daughter was extremely cruel and put down her self-esteem significantly. I retaliated back, saying that I was only expressing concern for Lara and that my concerns were realistic. After I told my husband my thoughts, we got into a bit of a dispute because, in my husband's words, my daughter's dreams were very realistic and that I shouldn't police my daughter's career autonomy. So Reddit, am I the butthole? Yep. The only thing a good mother could do in this situation, even if she really thought that it was too late for her daughter to pursue swimming professionally, was to give her daughter a chance to find out what kind of possibilities she has at 16 Do you have any kind of local club that can interview her for a possible training position? Basically, OP could do anything rather than what she did. Anything would be better. I cheated on my wife, but I am furious she's taking it this far. Yes, I know it's technically my fault, but I just cannot help but feel so much resentment towards her. She's divorcing me and splitting up our kids, and I cannot believe she would do this. I thought she was my ride or die, my partner in crime, but she's going to divorce over a lapse of judgment. I know people say this, but the affair genuinely didn't mean anything to me. I wish my wife would understand this. My wife is my home, my love, and my everything. While the other girl was just pleasure to relieve myself sometimes. I didn't have any emotional connection with her. I know I made a big mistake, but I do not understand why she would ruin everything over this. We were supposed to grow old together. Heck. Well, I guess you were supposed to grow old together until you effed everything up. No one will feel bad for you, dude. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed. You can also watch this awesome video or that awesome playlist. See you next time!